You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. Steven Willis of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to be joined in just a second by the transfer portal czar himself from Mike Farrell Sports, Mike Huesmann. He's going to be on the program, and he's going to let me know and let all of you know everything that he's kind of hearing through the grapevine right now. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the college football playoff a little bit, and we're going to just try and have a good time as well. Remember, tomorrow night, Ole Miss takes on Arkansas. The first ever crossover that I've done for basketball will be tomorrow with John Neighbors of Locked On Razorbacks. So tune in for that as well. So let's go on over to Mike Huesmann. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Yeah, glad to be here. It's hope you guys had a good holiday season, and since the last time we were on, Rebels got a big bowl win.
Yeah, they got they were the one SEC team that got a big bowl win. I mean, they're the ones that went out and took care of business, and I think that's probably going to help them in the transfer portal as this moves forward. I think a list on three put out a list of the top 10 players in the portal, and Ole Miss was involved in like 4 or 5 of them at this point. So it feels like Ole Miss is about to go on a little bit of a transfer portal run.
I think so. And, you know, looking at it, they've already brought in 15 commits through the portal. 247 has them as the 3rd overall portal class up to this point. And it wouldn't shock me if that goes up. Texas Tech is currently 2. They were 1 for a while. So right when the portal opened, Texas Tech got a wave of guys coming in. Good players, but they haven't brought in many guys in the last few days. So I think it was a fast and furious for them. But LSU and Ole Miss are 1 and 3 right now, and I expect them to stay near the top as we move through this. Both got bowl wins against notable schools, so it makes sense.
Yeah, the momentum is absolutely there. And it looks like, looking at the players that Ole Miss is kind of bringing in, there's a lot of safeties that's coming in, cornerbacks, they're kind of recruiting that as well. There's an offensive tackle, I think, from USC that mentioned Ole Miss today. What are you hearing in the transfer portal about Ole Miss specifically? And is there any player that maybe we haven't really been thinking about as somebody that could end up in Oxford?
So I think one guy to look at, this guy entered the portal today, but Connor Moore, FCS All-American, Montana State offensive tackle, he's the real deal, and he's going to go to a major school, I think. He's a guy everybody's going to look at until he commits. And, you know, I had made the comment right away that I think it's going to be either Temple or a really elite school. So several of the Montana State coaches on offense are going to go to Temple. I don't think he goes there, but you never know with the coaches. But I think Ole Miss and Iowa and Nebraska could be schools to look at, though with Nebraska, they did get Pritchett from Alabama, the tackle, to commit. And the O-lineman, you'd mentioned USC before, Emmanuel Pregnon is his name, and he's a dude, 6'5", 330, probably looks the part, has played both tackle and guard, so there's going to be some mobility there. Though, with him and looking at the other Ole Miss guys, he's probably a tackle if he goes to Ole Miss because they've already brought in multiple guards in the portal. You had Kutas from Arkansas, who is the top O-lineman in the portal to this point, and then Wilkins from Charlotte, and since we've talked last, Delano Townsend from UAB, another interior O-lineman, who is a mauler and a good run block, interior O-line guy.
Yeah, and hey, a run blocker for Ole Miss would be probably ideal with how they struggled to run the football last year. So you have to imagine they're finding people that have a little bit of run blocking chops, but can pass block as well. Now the question becomes, of these 2 tackles that are floating around the portal right now, with the right tackle position potentially being the most important Ole Miss position next year, can they both play on the right side? Which one How does that look?
I think Moore is probably your more prototypical blindside blocker. He's a little leaner, has more of a V shape to him, but in the pass game specifically, he's giving you more of the NFL style measurables that you look for in a blindside blocker. Whereas Pregnon is the downhill mauler that you're going to run behind near the goal line.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I guess it all depends on what Lane Kiffin wants to do next year, kind of, as far as who they, I guess, put their money behind, essentially,
Certainly.
for lack of a better phrase. Yeah.
No, that I think
because you're not going to recruit both of them.
No, they wouldn't, especially with them already having 3 guys coming in. With Pregnon, a guard spot's not there, so it's we're getting one of these tackles, hopefully, though both, especially Moore, will have lots of suitors, and considering he just went in the portal today, we'll probably know more early next week.
So at the running back position, there's just been, Ole Miss has had trouble finding a quarterback in the portal because of Austin Simmons. Everybody's afraid of that. And so it's going to be hard to do that anyway. But they're also having trouble finding running backs, it looks like. I mean, you have Logan Diggs, who's going to be back and healthy likely next year. Shakai Mills-Knight, who's going to be a true freshman. And they did get Kewan Lacey, the guy that they missed last year.
Yeah, and I think, in large part because of Lacey, you may not bring in another guy. I think he's a pretty solid player, and was solid at, or we thought he'd be solid at Mizzou. They had also brought in multiple portal guys with Carroll and Knoll, so didn't see the field as much, but I think he's a pretty solid player. The 2 that I thought they, would be in on were Ahmad Hardy from ULM, who is going to Mizzou now, and then Fluff Bothwell, South Alabama, who is going to Mississippi State now.
Yeah,
but
it should be
I was going to say, I think you mentioned too, with Diggs coming back, you didn't need a 3-down back who's going to be the guy all the time. A complimentary guy like Lacey can give you serviceable, stats for what you're looking at.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to move to the defensive side of the ball. There's no big 3 technique, no Walter Nolan or Princely Amamiellan in this class, but there are some cornerbacks that are a little bit interesting, so stick around for that. There's nothing like the energy of being at a live game, the roar of the crowd, the sounds of the sneakers squeaking on the court, and even spotting a few celebrities in the stands. I remember going to an NBA game a few years back. I do think it was the Timberwolves versus the Mavericks, and the electricity in the arena was unforgettable. You cannot replicate that from watching on your couch. This year, I'm looking forward to catching some more games live, going over to the arena and checking out the magic. And Game Time makes it easier than ever with their new Game Time Picks feature. Whether it's basketball, concerts, or theater, Game Time helps you find the best deals on great seats without the hassle of endless scrolling. I just hopped on the app to check out our tickets for an upcoming game, and Game Time Picks just made it a breeze to find a super deal on amazing seats. Plus, the app showed a panoramic view, so I could pick the perfect spot. No guesswork, no surprises, and it's not just sports. Game Time also has incredible deals on concerts and comedy shows. I'm going to the Midland concert next month in Tampa, and with all-in prices, I was able to see exactly what I had to pay up front. No hidden fees at checkout. What I love most about Game Time is the lowest price guarantee. If you're finding a better deal elsewhere, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. And with event cancellation protection, your tickets are covered if your plans change. It's the most flexible ticketing app I have ever used. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Mike, let's move to the defensive side of the football for Ole Miss. And this is where it's going to kind of get interesting because Ole Miss has to replace essentially the back part of that defense. They need to replace Trey Amos, who was really similar to the players that are in the transfer portal this year as far as they have tons of ability, but it needs to be unlocked. And Amos doing that at Ole Miss, that is kind of a windowsill of finding a corner. What cornerbacks are in the portal that Ole Miss fans should keep an eye on?
Well, you guys already got a commit from one who I think can be one of those guys, and that's Antonio Kite from Auburn. Skinny, very lean guy, not going to, give you as much support in the run game, but as a cover guy could be very good. He's elite, world-class athlete, also had a lot of D1 basketball offers coming out of college at the, power level. So Kite could be one of those guys. And then Sage Ryan from LSU is also a commit. He's a guy who, in a nickel, 5 D-back lineup, he could probably play about any of them. Super versatile across the back there. And he'll be a guy, I think, going into camp spring, we might not know where he's going to play because that might be dependent on who steps up at the other positions. Then you plug him in at, wherever you need a guy. So I think both of those two will be solid additions. And then another guy who recently entered the portal as a potential D-back to look at will be Thaddeus Dixon from Washington Huskies. Good player, tall guy, rangy. And he would be a corner type guy, not going to play in the middle there. And then another one who has been in the portal a long time and hasn't committed yet was Marcellus Barnes from Syracuse, who another corner type guy he's a Tennessee guy from Chattanooga originally, been mostly SEC, ACC teams that we've heard rumored for him. So, Ole Miss would fit that for him, and it's not too far from his hometown.
Yeah, it's weird. I forgot about Barnes. It's been so long in the portal. I just assumed that he was off the market at this point. Yeah, but if he's still there, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
The couple of safeties have been popping up as well. I mean, you can tell that Pete Golding he's methodically trying to piece together his defense through the portal and trying to. There's no superstars in the portal this year. There's no Walter Nolan floating around the portal this year. So Pete Golding is having to lean on his evaluation.
You're right.
Yeah. So Pete Golding kind of is having to trust his evaluation more so than last year this season.
Yeah. And one of the better, top 10 safety in the portal is King Mack, a guy from Alabama, who obviously we know Golding has a history there, and Mack could be a guy to look at. And another one who, we talk about being in the portal for a long time. When we've talked about this before, Jalen Stroman from Virginia Tech was a safety I had mentioned who could be a fit for you guys. He's still out there. He was hurt almost this entire year, didn't, hardly played in 24, but the past 2 years had done pretty well for Tech. So he could be a guy who I think is a P4 starter somewhere else.
Yeah, and we've gotten to the point also that it probably needs to be said. There's people that started classes this week, which means their drop add date's going to be in about 10 days.
Yep.
Which means the transfer portal at the end of January, Ole Miss has a huge advantage at the end of January because they do not start classes until January 21st. Their drop add date is February 2nd.
Yep.
That's their deadline, February 2nd.
I didn't realize they were that late. Yep.
Yeah, and so that means that is probably why over the last week or so you haven't seen the team Ole Miss rushing to sign people because Ole Miss has times. Ole Miss has 3 weeks.
Yeah, another one, we're talking about the defensive side of the ball. A guy we were talking about the last time was Andrew Jones, linebacker from Grambling, who, was visiting several SEC schools. And, the last time we talked, I said he was visiting the Gamecocks the next day, and he committed. And then 2 days later, he decommitted and committed to Ole Miss. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's a really good player. The linebacker from Marshall is a really good. I think he calls himself the 100-yard.
Yeah, he's a tackle machine. He's going to be one of those guys who, if you get a D tackle in front of him who's taking up blockers, he's just going to sweep up everything behind. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, so let's take some questions right here. Let's see. Gary Grizzard says, I'd like to know if we'd be getting a running back or a quarterback and anything on defense. We've been talking about the defensive side of the ball. I don't know about running back. I genuinely don't know. And there's a rumor, if you watch tomorrow's podcast, we talk about a quarterback out of high school that Ole Miss maybe end up about to land as well. Blake Glover says
he had mentioned defensive-wise, D tackle. You mentioned Nolan. Right now, there is not a D tackle in the portal that would start at Ole Miss right now. It's such a weak position right now because all the good guys have committed elsewhere.
Yeah. Blake Glover says, I'd love to find out if Juice is staying or leaving. I think it was Chuck Rounsaville of the Ole Miss Spirit said that Juice has already left Oxford. So,
okay.
It looks like Juice is gone off to the NFL and getting ready for the East-West Shrine game as well. So, we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's talk about just random transfer portal stories before we take our last break. What is going on around the country that has gotten your attention over the last couple of days?
I guess last few days, or since we've been here last, Rasul Faison, we were talking about the Gamecocks. He was one of the better running backs out there from Utah State. He committed to the Gamecocks. Tulane.
He got Diego Pavia ruled. Faison was supposed to be out of So this is another Pavia type situation.
Yeah. And he was JUCO Marshall, JUCO Utah State. So we had a lot of finagling there apparently. Makai Hughes from Tulane committed to Oregon. Another SEC, Noah Thomas, A&M, committed to Georgia today. Very big-bodied receiver, a guy's 6'5", 6'6".
You think Kirby Smart was upset about not having a good wide receiver unit this year?
Absolutely. And for a school that's recruited as well as they have, it's almost inexcusable that they were that poor at that position.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The defense was fine. Against Notre Dame, they gave up, 150 yards?
Yeah.
You're playing with a backup quarterback. You can't throw the football, and your running back is a second-teamer from Florida, and all of a sudden the skill guys just aren't there. And all of that depth. Listen, I did a podcast today, my show today, to where everybody's talking about, the downfall of the SEC and the ascendancy of the Big Ten and all that. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. If you are talking about that, you're looking at this wrong. What we are seeing is the death of the elite team to where anybody can beat anybody. That is what's happening. And teams like Colorado, Indiana, Ole Miss, all of a sudden they get elevated because those elite teams are no longer there. So Georgia's not what Georgia's been. Alabama obviously is not what Alabama's been. Ohio State's kind of like in the elite team death throes. Because they've lost games, but I don't know if they'll ever be this talented again.
And a very similar vein to that conversation I had with someone yesterday, and they talked about, Notre Dame is finally beating SEC teams. Like, hold on. Brian Kelly lost two, 14 playoff to SEC teams. Those were absolutely elite teams he lost to. Like, those Bama teams were unreal that beat his Notre Dame. It's a totally different ballgame now. And, the reason is we're getting more parity in those teams ranked 3 through 25 than we have had in years.
Yeah. The first thing in the 12-team playoff, and I'll explain to everybody that's listening to this my theory on this. The 12-team playoff means that there's not 6 teams that can recruit to the playoff, because that is what had been developed in college football to where those 6 teams were able to recruit elite athletes to the college football playoff. Now that it's expanded, all of a sudden there's more places that they can go. Then the transfer portal meant that those elite teams lost their second and third teamers that they've normally been able to stockpile. And those went to other schools, making it to where you had 16 or so teams that were playoff worthy. Now, you'll never have another elite team, but you're probably going to have a better college football product than previously existed.
Absolutely. And I don't think we'll ever have the kind of streak that, Saban had at Bama, where one team is going to be in the Final Four, so much. And, his string of everybody that played for him for 4 years won a title. Probably not going to get that anymore, or anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's so this transfer portal thing, it's not everybody that has their mindset of the way it was back then. It's not going to be like that anymore. Transfer portal is going to be much more volatile than it was with the high school recruiting and the program building that existed. Yeah. Florida State, they went undefeated the regular season, ACC champions. The next year they went 2-10. Yep. They attacked the transfer portal both years. One year they hit, the next year they didn't. And
exactly.
That's an extreme version of what it's going to look like. But you can't just go ahead and count. It's like, okay, we're good last year, we're going to be good next year. That's not a thing anymore.
No, and there's going to be a great example of that would be this year with Indiana, Arizona State. We're continually going to have teams who we didn't think would be in the playoffs in preseason that will be able to make a run for that because everything will hit and line up right, and you have more leeway with 12 teams getting in the playoff now.
All right, when we come back, I'm going to talk to Mike about my 16-team playoff plan that I think that college football would be silly not to do after this year, so stick around for that. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's just thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Mike. I'm pretty excited about this. This is my playoff plan. I think that the main problem with this 12-team playoff was the automatic bids and buys. And the buys specifically because it messed up the natural order of the bracket. It shouldn't have been a situation to where Boise State was the number 3 seed playing Penn State. That was a first-round game. Yeah. Arizona State playing Texas, that's a first-round game. That's not a quarterfinal game. I think a 16-team playoff so that automatic buys and all that don't exist anymore. The higher-seeded team gets the home game. The lower-seeded team travels to them. You end up getting the games that probably should have been this time with like Tennessee hosting SMU, with those type of games. Arizona State traveling to, I don't know, the Horseshoe. I guess Clemson would go to Oregon, something like that. Yeah, I might have the seeding a little bit wrong, but those are the type matchups that will make the bracket actually not artificially set because that is what happened this year.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the buys in theory. It's how we did the seeding that set up those matchups after the bye. I think expansion will come. I would even be okay, 16 probably happens. Even if we go to 14 right away and have 2 buys, that doesn't bother me. That's fine because if we have only 2 buys, you probably know who the 2 deserving would be, and then the seeding after that will be more of a natural order as opposed to your Boise and Arizona State's manufacturing buys where you then get mismatches and the nominal higher seed is the underdog in reality by double digits or by multiple possessions in both of those games.
Yeah, you come up with a good idea. This 12-team playoff would have been fine if they would have been able to protect themselves from keeping their thumb on the scales. Yep. They want to tip it in their own directions, whatever they're trying to do. If you could avoid doing that, you could have something would probably have some staying power. But this year, structurally, it was just a mess. It's going to end up with an Ohio State, Notre Dame, or a Texas versus Penn State. Whoever gets to the championship game is going to deserve to be there. So at the end result, that worked out. But at the beginning, the first round, it was kind of shambolic because I'm going to be real. Ohio State and Tennessee had no business playing in the first round. Notre Dame didn't have any playing Indiana in the first round.
And that's another one with the, we had in the quarterfinals, 3 of those games probably shouldn't have happened when they did because Boise probably shouldn't have had a bye. Arizona State probably shouldn't have had a bye. Notre Dame, who was not eligible to get a bye, maybe should have been seated higher. So that's 3 games that shouldn't have happened when they did.
Yeah. And like a situation to where those teams are playing, they're just quarterfinal games. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
and Oregon, who got throttled, probably was undone by the way the seeding happened because as the clear number 1, they shouldn't have had to play Ohio State when they did that. Probably wasn't right. Yeah, they should have had to play
Clemson. They should have played Clemson. Yeah. And that's just the way it works. All right. So we have a couple of questions that have popped up on there. This is from Alan Hawkins. Realistically, how good can the defensive line be after this all-time great defensive line? I don't know that if it's going to be possible. I don't know if you should compare next year's defensive line to this year's defensive line at Ole Miss.
No.
But
maybe their edge rushers can be good. I don't think in the interior they can be as good.
Yeah, Jam Brown got freshman All-American, so they're going to be good. Xavier Harris played a ton this year, so they're going to be salty.
Harris,
there's no Princely Amon-Mielen. There's no Walter Nolan. There's no Jared Ivey, who is low-key. He was the 3rd on that line. There's no J.J. Pegues. You're losing that whole starting front. So there is going to be a step back. The question becomes whether or not Ole Miss can find defensive linemen that can force double teams on 2 players. If you can find 2 defensive linemen that can require double teams, all of a sudden the linebackers have a chance to do what they're doing, and this defense is going to be pretty good.
If they can do that, then you have Yates and Jones tackling everything that comes near them.
Yeah, which I think is and TJ Daugherty coming back as well. So Ole Miss needs to work on the back end of their defense, and I think that is what the commitment barrage is going to be coming up shortly for Ole Miss.
I should know this, but I don't. Is Perkins coming back for you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
He's going to be – that's one of the reasons I'm not so worried about replacing a Princely Amon-Mielen because Perkins is going to be in that role. He is going to Princely Amon-Mielen. So that happens. Xavier Harris, I'm going to feel pretty good. Jam Brown, I'm okay with that. The right side with Cam Franklin, who is going to be a true sophomore, or Deshaun Womack over on that side of the deep. That is the interesting spot to me. Yeah.
And I think one other thing to look for will be because of the lack of D tackles in the portal in the spring, the May-June spring portal. Do they get one of the top D tackles then? Because someone will go in the portal then who isn't now.
Yeah, and one thing that's weird, it would be nice if Ole Miss got a little physical during spring football to find out what you had at the defensive tackle position, so you'd know that. But Ole Miss is notoriously kind of small, and they kinder, gentler spring, so it may not happen. They didn't even have a spring game last year, so Ole Miss might not even
about that.
Ole Miss might not even take a defensive tackle in the spring because they're just not going to know. So I just don't know. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much, Mike, for stopping by. Anything you want to add?
No, glad to be here. Always a pleasure. And we talk about fun stuff. And I really enjoyed your portal idea of the 16 and reseeding. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it's always good. I'm sure everybody that watches the show is happy to see the Portal Czar when he comes on Tuesday night. It's glad that the holidays are kind of over and we can get back to it. I appreciate it, bud.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, you too.